You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online, and my name is Andrew Mackay-Smith. Hope you are well out there. The interview subject I've prepared for you is Jono Colliver from the Melbourne outfit Dr. Colossus. The catalyst for the conversation is the band's new album for 2021, which shall see a release on the 26th of May. Now stay with me here. It is called I am a stupid moron with an ugly face and a big butt, and my butt smells, and I like to kiss my own butt. No prizes for guessing what the band might have taken inspiration from with that album title there, but if you're still clueless, it's The Simpsons. So, Dr. Colossus is a Simpsons concept or themed doom, stoner, metal, heavy groove outfit, all of the above. Awesome stuff, actually. Far from a gimmick, as I talk about throughout the opening exchanges or nearabouts of the conversation you're about to tune in. So let's get to it. Here he is, Jono from the outfit Dr. Colossus.
Hey, mate.
Hello, mate. Right on time, actually. 2 minutes early. You get the award this year for being the most on time. Congratulations.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I'm always worried about being late, so I'm always a little bit early to everything.
Same here, but you'd be surprised. Big names I don't care about because sometimes they can be up to, weeks late. But what normally happens is we organise these sorts of things, and with all due respect to people's capabilities on technology, they struggle with the old Zoom thing. But you're clearly adept. You're not in that basket.
Yeah, no, my life's living on Zoom at the moment, so I'm well and truly aware of it.
You're in Melbourne or Sydney?
I'm in Melbourne.
Yeah, good old Melbourne, eh? We're about to go on. We are in lockdown now, actually.
Yeah, I heard. Sorry to hear.
Mate, it's yeah. Oh, look, it's my podcast, and I generally air all of my opinions. And God knows what people already know what I think, but it's just foolish. Should be surgical lockdowns. Can you believe
surgical lockdowns?
So the Premier of New South Wales was locking down municipalities, local council areas, and not the entire city.
Yep.
Which and Sydney is. There was some enormous statistic where Sydney itself is funding something like a quarter of the job seeker and job keeper program. More, I think it was even a third, just because their economy is still going, and she's managed to get through it without locking everything down. But it's political manna from heaven at the moment. If you've seen the Western Australian political result where the Libs retained 2 seats, I think something unbelievable. Anyway, it was far worse than what happened in Queensland in 2011 or 12 with Anna Bligh, where they were down to about 4 or 5 seats. They've only got 2 seats over there because, mate, this fear porn thing, you don't want people to die, do you? Well, nobody wants people to die, but we also don't want our economies to crumble and for people to lose their jobs and for a suicide epidemic to flourish. You can actually have one without the other if you've got saner people in power. But unfortunately, we have a tendency to sort of ignore what bands and musicians need to do, which is play live. And there's not really any end in sight, I don't think, at the moment, is there?
Well, yeah, until that vaccine gets rolled out, then I think we're going to be stuck in this loop for a little while.
Indeed, mate. Yeah,
sadly.
Indeed. Yep. Well, look, you haven't come on here to listen to me bleed on about the state of the political world. Look, first thing I want to raise with you, Jono, is that you guys are far from a piss take, which, to be honest with you, I was expecting, because the music's legit. And I'm a musician, so I do listen with a musician's ear. But, mate, look, for someone like myself, old school Caius fan, Fu Manchu, this sort of thing, I mean, you guys are pretty much straight down the line with that stuff, probably doing it as well as what I heard those guys do. So please do take that as much of a compliment as I can offer you.
Appreciate it.
So that said, you're far from a gimmick, and I want people to know that. So why did you decide to use The Simpsons as inspiration?
Well, we love those bands too, and I think originally we were playing in different bands, and myself and our original drummer Nathan, who's going to come up in conversation a lot, who's no longer with us, passed away a few years ago. He and I were already playing in a few bands that were of that stonery desert rock sort of vibe. And this was just an idea to kick around at home and have have a laugh between us. And it was probably, our third or fourth stoner rock band, and we were like, oh, we should just make this one stupid and for fun, and never going to do anything with it. It's just we'll make the stupidest songs we can, and make it, as kind of heavy and big and stereotypically named. And originally it was going to be something, big, mammothy, Colossusy, and Colossus. Dr. Colossus was a character in The Simpsons, so we thought, oh, why not just take that name and then the lyrics can all be based on episodes of The Simpsons. So it started as a serious band first, but neither of us were very neither of us take ourselves that seriously. So the joke continues to this day.
I've been impressed though, mate. What's the song that I've been listening to? Pick a Bar that Miller sent through, and I've had that on quite a bit, I've got to say. Great hooks in there. It's almost like you write the songs, I take it, do you? For the most part?
We're all pretty much writing now. That one's one that came from my original riff ideas though, yeah. And I write the vocal melody stuff for that. So yeah, that's one of mine. So that's good that you like that one.
I've liked just about everything that I've heard because I've deep dived onto YouTube because Miller just sent the single track across to sort of gauge some interest there. But you seem to have figured out the meeting point like Led Zeppelin did between melody and that mammoth groove that you guys have got. So is that something that's it's a difficult question to answer. I appreciate that. But look, I go there anyway with these things, Is this something that you've been inspired to do by listening to a particular band, like the Zeppelins, the Sabbaths, this sort of thing, and the other two that I mentioned earlier? Or do you think this is something that's just within you and you just found a way to manifest it?
Both, I think, and it's a good question because it's probably the fundamental backbone of what we're trying to do, I guess. I always loved bands that were heavy, but I also always loved pop songs as much as I tried to shy away from it when I was growing up and would never admit to liking something that was, poppy and catchy. I would find myself constantly watching Rage when I was a kid, and the dumb novelty pop tracks would always get stuck in my head. And whether I wanted to admit it or not, I think that was sort of forming what I wanted to chase out of all the music that I was listening to. And I guess I had like bands like Goat Snake that are like low tuned kind of
sludge metal sort of stuff,
sludgy, but melodic as well. I think when I started to hear that I can't scream or rip my voice up like a lot of those sludge bands could, or like I Hate God or any of those sort of bands. I just can't do that with my voice. But those bands like Goat Snake and Caius to some degree, but I was never a huge Caius nerd. Those are the bands that I was like, oh yeah, you can actually still have a catchy hook and a catchy song and be heavy at the same time. So yeah, sometimes you go too far the other way and you lose your heaviness, but I think that's the line we're trying to straddle constantly.
Yeah, and to be honest, may you never find it in terms of the ultimate end goal, because it's fun hearing you evolve and continue to chase the dragon, so to speak. So, look, when you're playing live as well, and I know you toured with Oakley Dokley, and I did have a chat to Head Ned a couple of years ago, whenever you guys toured with them, obviously, whenever that was. Do people who follow you on social media, do they expect the outfits that say the Ned Flanders thing, like what the guys in Oakley Dokley are doing? Like, do they think that you're going to turn up like Chief Wiggum, that sort of thing?
I don't really know what people expect from us at a live show. I guess nowadays with social media and with any photos we're taking of ourselves, we dress in the costumes and we don't really shy away from the visual reference to The Simpsons at all. So I assume people probably hope to see that when they come to the show. And I think if people happen to be at a show we're playing and they've never heard of us, it's definitely you see a few heads in the crowd sort of turn and look and kind of like, what is going on here? Like, this looks absolute garbage, but I'm going to stick around and see what transpires.
It's great stuff. I'm gushing a little because I love Caius so much, which is I find it interesting that you said you use the word you weren't a Caius nerd, but then I can also you're not copying Caius at all. But I love John Garcia's voice, and I've had a chat to John a couple of times, so I've got some insight into his personality, and I like him as a bloke too. It's always fantastic when you meet somebody and they're good people, and you've loved their music for years as well. But I think there's that you talk about not going in that death metal gravelly style voice because I think that'll ruin what you guys are trying to do here. So, has there ever been talk of bringing somebody like that in at all? Like not do like co-vocalist scenario, like a guitarist or a bass player who could do it alongside you?
Probably not as a permanent member. But I'll backtrack a little bit. When I said I'm not a Caius nerd, that's not in any way being disparaging to people who like Caius. It's just that there's not a lot of Caius that I'm familiar with, like some people are. So, Blues for the Red Sun, and then like a little bit of And the Circus.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. There are some people who just go nuts over it, aren't
I
they?
kind of dipped in and out of Caius a lot. They never really. I wasn't a huge fan of the like everything they did because I just never really delved in. So, but that aside, in terms of screaming, I think we'd probably bring guest vocalists in for like certain tracks, and we've talked about doing it before. We actually, when we were touring with Oakley Dokley, Head Ned screams. So we did a couple of tracks and he jumped up and screamed on the top of it. And that was the first time we kind of got to test out that style of thing. But Mike, the bass player, has also got a super gravelly, deep voice as well. So he kind of does bring a little bit of gravel in with the vocal. And I don't know whether we would ever have a permanent screaming member. Like a lot of bands tend to have a melodic singer and a heavy singer or a growling singer. But I guess I've always liked. I've never really liked when you're listening to a band like that, the transition between the two becomes quite repetitive after a while. So like
you can predict it.
Screaming verse, a beautiful soaring chorus of melody. And I just I can't write songs that aren't repetitive if they stick to that, I guess. So, yeah, I don't think we'd ever do it, but maybe.
God, you've talked about 90% of the metalcore bands out there, I think, with the screamy verses and the melodic choruses. I'll tell you what, the kids still love it, don't they? They love that stuff. I get so many new releases a week. It's slowed down a little bit, of course, because of what we're going through, but there's still quite a few that come through, and I'd say any of these bands that making a visual judgment look like they're underneath the age of 25, they're a metalcore band and they're doing exactly what you're saying there. But hopefully they evolve a little bit beyond that because I firmly believe that's been done to death, that one there.
Yeah, I don't, and I'm trying to be as like even-handed as possible, but I don't resonate with a lot of that stuff. I guess because when I first heard that stuff being done, it was bands like Linkin Park when nu metal was kind of burgeoning and the alternating vocalist was like a rap vocal in the verse, sung vocal in the chorus with a bit of a scream. And the other thing is I find it I've never liked bands that have two singers going back and forth. I don't mind Melvins where you've got two singers singing in unison as a sort of gang thing. And I don't mind, bands where one singer sings a whole song, another singer sings another song. I think as a listener, I just prefer to lock into one voice rather than being thrown around back and forth too much.
I'm with you. I think I certainly wouldn't say it's a criticism that I've got of Mastodon, but it's approaching a criticism, no doubt, because I tend to, like you talk about there, I tend to groove on a dynamic. And when that dynamic shifts too much, it probably detracts from something that I think is more cohesive. And it's a great point you raised there. And just with the metalcore bands too, That's a genre that I thought, and I haven't made that link that you just made there. That's a good pickup, actually. That it did come from new metal, where they were the clean vocal was a rap, and of course then it morphed into guys who were listening to Cannibal Corpse alongside of Linkin Park, and then of course you got some other guys that were listening to Weezer, who started
Yeah.
to come in and
Yeah.
swap out the Weezer for the Linkin Park, so to speak.
Yeah. Emo. I guess there's the punk rock kids did something around that era with, as you say, Weezer, which is like proto emo metal, or,
Absolutely.
or like rock. I love Weezer too, but um, somewhere along the way, I don't know why I slipped off that train, but I I don't even think about it that much.
I'll tell you what, it's a subject that I can talk about for a long time. Believe me, because Weezer were one of my favourite bands growing
Mm,
up. I'm in my 40s, but Weezer, I love the Blue album, but Pinkerton came out and just everything stopped. I actually would still say it's my favourite album of all time.
mm.
But
It's
there's,
interesting. It's this. I always thought it sounded a little bit shitter than Blue Album, but the songs are awesome.
yep,
Like
agreed.
it's got a kind of it's almost more garagey than Blue.
Hmm. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. But what happened there, I think, and this is my theory, and I've actually reached out to him to have a chat. Matt Sharp left. So Matt Sharp being the bass player who also sang, and I think it did was responsible for a lot of the melodies. You could
Yeah.
hear that big shift in songwriting after he left. So I don't know. I know that Rivers writes 90% of the music, but it's that someone going over the top for quality control that was missing. And
Mm,
Scott, I don't rate Scott Schreiner as a melodic bassist at all, being a bassist myself.
yeah.
Matt's just fantastic, and having seen the band when Matt was in it, I can tell you they were truly on point for a band in the mid '90s. Um,
What was his? Have you heard his other band?
the Rentals, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's I enjoy that band too.
When I met him in 1995, 1996, 1996, he told me I was the only person in Australia that gave him the CD to sign.
Oh wow.
I wish I had it
Yeah.
to show it to you, but it's in a, like all CDs, they're nowhere near me at the moment. They're in a storage area somewhere. But yeah, he scribbled something on the front cover of the sleeve, and he and the drummer, whose name escapes me at the moment, sorry, I remember it any other time. So they were both in the band. But Matt's still doing it. Can you believe it? Because when I contacted his publicist, I said, "Look, I'd love to have a chat about the new Rentals album."
Oh
So
shit.
he's still doing it, but it doesn't sound anything like it did on the debut.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll have to
Yeah,
check that out. Yeah, I think
yeah.
it's probably only that debut I've heard. It's kind of like a little bit Devo-y at times, and yeah, it takes like the sort of yeah that thing that he had in Weezer and goes in a slightly different slant with it.
Hmm. Yeah, he does. Yeah, he influenced Blur and a few other bands with that album. Actually, that's why Blur in 1997 came out with that album with Song Two on it. You know, so
Ah,
yeah, yeah. So yeah, believe me, that's a rabbit hole I can keep diving down. Trust me with that one there, because I'm more known as the metal. My podcast, particularly with extreme metal, but I've got a massive background in bands like Weezer, all the way over to something which is completely different, like Level 42, and a
mhm.
lot of the funk and disco bands, because I've played in a lot of those sort of bands just to turn a quid, played covers and the like. So metal is just
Gotcha.
but one,
Yep,
of the things that I
yep.
listen to. I'm sure it's the same for you too, though.
Yeah, we probably share that in common.
Yeah. Well, I don't understand how people stay to one genre or one style. It's I've never understood it, because I'd be listening to Obituary and the next song coming on would be Good Times by Chic.
Mm,
That's just the way I rolled, man.
mm.
you know,
Good
Mate,
music.
just go back. I won't labour the point with COVID, okay? But I mean, the reality is that I think most of the venues are on hold in Melbourne, aren't they? Which,
No, we're going pretty good now. So in the last little while, the main restrictions to caps have lifted. Um, so we had a show not too long ago that was capped at 200, and that venue's just expanded its cap to 300. So it's about three quarters of the capacity. So restrictions have lifted pretty well, and our mask mandates lifted now. So for now, we're back in that zone of pretty free up, uh, free ability to just wander into a show like normal, but
Hmm.
who knows how long it'll last.
No, agreed. Yeah, that's the problem at the moment. I think for the venues and the bands, because certainly touring's out of the question for you at the moment, isn't it? Doing anything like that, spreading the word.
Well, we've got a tour booked for June, and we've been knocking back shows pretty much the whole time before then. We had actually booked a tour, or East Coast sort of run that was going to be around now, and we canned that about a month ago when Sydney was under again.
Hmm.
So we've set it at June. We just pushed back to June, and rather than kind of try and risk it any earlier than that. And all you can do is just shoot for the future and hope that it's hopefully it's going to be clear when you go to play shows.
Yeah, yeah. And does that affect your day job, so to speak, if you've got one? Does that, in other words, like putting in for annual leave so they can do the short run shows?
Well, we've all got day jobs, and we actually just book shows pretty much to run on weekends. So it's not
Okay.
really a big deal with annual leave for us. Yeah, we're kind of getting old and cranky, and we're not jumping in the bus and doing like
Oh
100
God.
gigs in a week. So we're yeah, most of the time we're flying out on a Friday and coming back Sunday anyway, just knocking out 3 next week, knock out another 3, that style.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it's not
gotcha.
too bad. If anything, it just opens up more weekends for us to spend with our families or whatnot.
Yeah, I can't play every weekend like I used to. It kills me these days. The energy levels, isn't it? It's you get to Monday and you feel like you've been hit by a tornado.
Yeah, it's a good thing though. You get that warm afterglow feeling as well. Like if you've had a good weekend of shows and then you go back to work and you've got some shows under your belt, you're like, oh, doesn't really matter what the rest of this week looks like. At least we had a great weekend. But
I
yeah,
know
you
the
can't do
feeling,
it
brother.
forever.
Yeah.
Burns you out pretty quick.
I like your social media game and also the video strategy that you've got too. So do you take care of all of that sort of stuff?
I do. Yeah, we share the social media a little bit. But and whatever I'm flattered that you call it a strategy, but the clip was purely just the most recent clip was
Pick a bar,
when
yeah.
we were all locked down, we couldn't get together, so we just needed to come up with a way of having some kind of a narrative that attached to the song that
Hmm.
that I just spent months whittling away editing it together.
I liked how you picked. I assume you picked stock footage there, but what I find with a lot of stock footage is it's modern, it's too current, it's too HD. Whereas I think if you picked a lot of HD imagery to go with and video footage to go with your music, it wouldn't suit. So you've picked some stuff which is fairly low def, and it works beautifully. I love for people listening, check out the video because it's this whole thing about sending the band into space and using this stock footage of these astronauts and then superimposing. Is it face swap technology that you've used on that? Is that freely available tech that you've used
Yeah,
there?
it's just that it's the app that everyone was using for a little while on their phones. And
Yep.
I just saved off footage onto my phone and then re-uploaded it back onto editing software.
Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah,
good
it was
fun. It's good value.
one of those situations. I got a little delay there. Sorry.
No, all good. Yeah, yeah. The internet connection's a bit potato, isn't it? It sort of cuts in and out occasionally, but all
Could
good
be
if you
me.
can
I'm
hear
not
me.
sure.
I've got a pretty good connection here, but look, shit happens with Zoom. Believe me, I've had far worse. So pressing on,
Yeah,
no
it's good
worries.
now. I think we're clear.
Sweet, yeah, because we've talked about it. You see, so it works.
Yeah,
It's like when you got a problem with your car and you take it to the mechanic and say it's making this knocking sound, and they drive and go, "No knocking sound." What a coincidence!
we broke the curse.
As long as it's fixed, yeah. What I like going into this side of things because I do a fair bit of video myself. Although it just takes so long, and I've got 2 kids, and you lose your train of thought when you sort of go away from it. But are you using Premiere Pro or what's the software you're using there?
I actually did it all in After Effects. Um, yeah, so I'm a graphic designer by
Oh, there you
trade,
go.
and
Yeah.
I'm used to using After Effects for just motion graphic stuff. and that was what I knew. So I probably could have done it in Premiere, and it probably would have made my computer not explode every time I tried to do stuff in it. But yeah, I just pretty much like anything these days. If I hit a bump or want to figure out how to do something, you just YouTube tutorial myself to the end of it and export it, and Bob's your uncle.
I do the same. I mean, it's the only way to get things done. And I'm always inspired by a comment that Rob Zombie made a couple of years ago on Joe Rogan's podcast, where he talked about forget about asking for advice, go ahead and do it and figure it out along the way. Paraphrasing, of course, but it's been so inspiring because I've pivoted out of news media into writing books, biographies specifically. And I mean,
Yeah.
there's no course you can take. You've just got to do it, and that's what I'm doing. I'm in the Queensland State Library at the moment, writing. I'm a resident writer in there with the Queensland Writers Centre. But the point is, like I think you've just explained, and I like talking about this sort of stuff because I think people think you've got to wait for some guru to appear to dispense advice and or take these very expensive courses which aren't really designed to do shit, to be honest with you. My point is always that if you can't find it, figure it out. Don't pay for it. And I'm not trying to rip anybody off out of any earn here, but it's just that there's so many tutorials out there that you don't have to pay for. Premiere Pro, I've got probably 200 links that I need to dive into with Premiere Pro in order to get better effects management, this sort of thing. But you obviously had some training though, and after that, it's just a case of like you say, you just sort of dive into the tutorials and figure things out.
Yeah, I guess I've been using Adobe stuff, doing like layout and photo editing sort of stuff for a long time. And then I've also, on the other hand, been doing audio stuff when you're recording your own demos or pre-production or something like that. But I'd never done video editing until like a few years ago. And then just, I wanted to make myself indispensable at my job. And I was like, oh, only way I'm going to do this is to just pick up animation and start doing it. And I found that it wasn't too much of it. It was just like a combination of those two things, like timeline based software that you'd be used to in audio editing or Pro Tools or Audition, and then layer based image layer frame,
like Photoshop,
ways of thinking. So
sweet.
it was kind of a natural thing, but I don't even think it's something that I'm going to continue with. It's more just like we needed to do this for the band, and like most of these things, it's just like, right, how do we do it? What's the best way to do it? Get it done, make it good, put some effort into actually like presenting it as best we can, and not lose sleep on it, and keep hitting the next thing.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, great plan, that one there. But I've had a chat to Miller. God, it was a couple of years ago now with Black Reno when those guys had a tour or a new release. I can't remember now. But Miller's doing some pretty good stuff these days. He had Child Bite out a couple of years ago as well. I think he might have had some. I could be wrong, but I think he might have had something to do with Phil Anselmo as well. But but you guys, how did you guys connect?
I just love a lot of the bands that he'd been working with Cult Etiquette, and like bands like the Amenta that I hadn't heard about for years, and I can't even remember Bremelin, bands like that. I was like, oh
yeah, had a chat to those guys here. I remember them. Yeah,
I was like, oh, this is like this is good to see these bands actually getting their stuff kind of serviced properly now, and like getting like out and about again, because I, for a while I was into like, I used to get into like the grindcore scene in Melbourne, and there was so many like ripping bands 10 or 15 years ago that would put out albums after that and just deserved so much more recognition, and so much more widespread sort of distribution of even the news that they had new records out. But bands like Captain Cleanoff, and they'd put in, like, when I first heard of those guys and was going and seeing them, it was just like, whatever they put out next is going to be fire. And then those guys are all sort of getting a bit older, and unless you go and want to go through the whole media junket and get your press release sorted and put all the effort and money into promoting it. Those bands just put out an album and then it's like album's out, and you miss, like, half the time I realized 2 years later that one of my favorite bands from back then's got an album out. So I'd seen Cold Etiquette start to put press releases out for bands like that I loved. And then I was just like, well, let's give them a crack.
Yep. Yeah, that's all you got, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, if they're dealing with, I like how they're dealing with, Miller was dealing with bands that you liked. And so you felt that there must have been some synchronicity there, that if they're doing a decent job for bands that you like, they could probably do something similar for you guys.
Yeah, bands that I liked, and also bands that I didn't think were particularly commercial. Like, shit, those bands are a hard sell to,
Yeah.
even to metal media these days. And like, you know, there's some great stuff out there, and you yourself as coming from a journalistic background, I'm sure you see the same thing too. There's still some great writers out there. There's still some great publications, and then there's just some absolute garbage that is purely based now around algorithmic kind of lifeline.
You get it.
Like,
yeah, you understand
how much can we mention Corey Taylor in an interview, and like this guy
it's terrible. Yeah.
The guy from King Crimson and his partner singing a cover, and what is
Robert Fripp and Toya. Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it?
And what does Dave
Very
Grohl
weird.
think of that? And like, there's just like these loops that they all go in, and it's like, any wonder why people don't bother trying to go through music media to do anything anymore. Like,
unfortunately, a lot of music media has become like a lot of news media. It's basically activism, editorials, and they, especially with rock music, I've got to say, which is just, I mean, I got over a long time ago trying to promote rock music and metal in mainstream publications because they simply aren't interested. It will not get a gig. You only have to read through. Did I thumb through the Rolling Stone or one of those types of magazines recently? There wasn't a single rock band that, 30-second flip through that I could pick up. When you've got Miley Cyrus and Machine Gun Kelly, I think it was, being nominated in the best rock category in the Grammys, you got serious issues, I think, particularly when bands like you guys are around. And it's just, I've done well over 600 interviews at this point, and almost any of the rock and metal bands that I've interviewed would deserve to be nominated in some way, shape, or form if they've managed to build a career. We talk about Caius and the like, but we saw what the Grammys did with Eddie Van Halen. A 15-second blurb with a guy who influenced just about all modern rock and pop. I mean, that's how influential Van Halen truly is. I think he's one of the absolute all-time greats for his originality and his influence. But rock music these days, man, it's and then you go to the other side of it, which is the metal blogs, and I can't stand them, mate. I mean, my stuff gets picked up on Blabbermouth all the time, but I've got an overall view with Blabbermouth that it can't hurt because it's still publicity for the bands, and I notice, and I just hope that even if they've picked up some clickbaity article, that kids or whoever reads is then inspired to go and check out the music rather than just read the clickbait article. God knows it's a percentage.
And
what that be.
And I'm sure that there is good stuff that comes out of that. Like, and it's much in the same way of like when we were talking about, a lot of and we sound like we're two old white guys talking about bands that we don't like anymore. But that sort of the newer metalcore kind of world, like, I'm sure that there's a lot of kids that listen to that stuff and end up going on and exploring more interesting metal or heavier music or atmospheric electronic stuff or just more experimental stuff. I'm sure there are a lot that trickle through. And as you say, any of those publications, if it gets in front of 2 or 3 kids that go, "Oh, sick, this is actually up my alley." Yeah, that's all you can hope for, really.
It is, and I also think one of the key reasons I haven't pursued regular music journalism, particularly with extreme metal and the like, is the quality of the writing is just shit house.
Yeah,
and the questions the questions they're asking the bands are just so stupid Truly, like there's no academic rigor associated with their approach. It's just, to your point there about Corey Taylor and the algorithm. It's actually that cynical, and part of me understands it, but another part of me says, guys, there's got to be some thought leadership here. If you're going to start a blog, whether it's metal injection or what have you, you've got to have some, like, dive into the tough topics. The reason why I know that they don't do that is because even with my interviews, I ask a lot of questions, and people would ordinarily potentially find them fairly sensitive topics, but I still go there with the artist because God knows I'm a nobody and I'm only going to get this one chance to talk to them.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I mean, this is
Yeah,
the point. Go there,
yeah,
and some of them have become mates afterwards. Just
yeah.
communicating, but they appreciate that people are taking a deeper interest rather than what was it like touring with such and such a band, or tell me about that on stage story. Ha ha ha.
Yeah. And the hard bit is it puts the onus on the person being interviewed because you've got to come back with more than one word answers. And that's like, if you're fighting an uphill battle to add words to a one word response, it's like, any wonder people get exhausted getting interviewed by these guys. But yeah, I guess it's these people are scared of, well, they're big organizations that own a lot of them. Like I remember like Noisy and Vice and those kind of big.
Yep.
These journalists can't ask super hard questions or put their artists on the spot because it's going to reflect badly on the publication. They're going to get, people who are the shareholders are going to get a bit sketchy on these particular publications are rattling too many cages. All we want to do is just service the artist. We just want to appease the PR guys that are coming to us, the advertising money that's coming to us. We just want to get basically regurgitate their press release out. So stop asking these questions. Like, yeah, I guess people are scared to take risks, and people are don't want to curate. No one says no to stuff. It's just like, if you pay enough, you'll get on and
Yeah.
pay for an ad. We'll do a review for you as well.
You get it. The people reading, for the most part, 90% plus don't get it, though. They just think, oh, this is interesting. This is an interesting story. And God knows the amount of stories that I've read that have a pretty good headline, I've got to admit, in classic rock or what have you on the Facebook feed. And you get in there and there's actually no story.
Yeah.
One of the best, I think, at getting pretty good insightful responses out of people is Eddie Trunk. Have you listened to him very much?
No, I don't know Eddie Trunk.
He's an old rock and metal guy in the States, big Kiss fan. So to give you an idea where he's sort of coming from, but he's still, he had Tony Iommi and not Bill Ward, Geezer Butler on today. I listened to it today, but it was released in the last sort of 2 or 3 days or so. And he's not afraid to ask difficult questions to the point where I think he's pissed off Rob Halford, who doesn't want to talk to him ever again. But I think my point is, and this is my media training kicking in, but look, if you're not pissing people off, you're not asking the right questions. And that's not to be rude or demeaning in any way, but there are topics. I've just, God, do you know Cradle of Filth at all? The band
Yeah.
Cradle of Filth? Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm Nick Barker. I'm emailing him back and forth at the moment. He's taken exception to something that I've said in the book I'm writing that I shared with him. So I'm just trying to iron that one out right now. But that's my point, is that journalists we have to do this. We actually have to do the hard yards and be willing to. I didn't try to offend Nick in any way, shape, or form. It's just a way that I framed something, that he can't stand Cradle of Filth these days, and he wants me to reframe something
I
that I've said.
see. Yeah. Okay. It's more about his
it all.
personal brand than anything else.
Oh, I think he's at a point now. What I notice, mate, is that when these guys who have got a name like Nick does, when they hit about early 50s, well, the gloves come off. They don't care anymore. There's a few exceptions, but I find that they might share a lot with me. And then after I've finished, they might say, look, please don't broadcast that. I've had to think about it. That's happened quite a few times, I've got to say.
Yeah.
And I will always honor that. But I'll also, when I'm reaching out to people to have these, particularly with that band Cradle of Filth, my God, a band that's had 40 members over the past 25 odd years or so. Most of them are, and certainly most of that I've spoken to aren't happy, the ex-members.
Yeah.
And they've got a story to tell, but it's whether or not they want to actually go on record with that story, which is where I'm wearing my journalist hat and I'm going, look, there's a big tale here, and there's a lot of things here people don't know, and you've been pretty much kicked to the curb in the media.
Yeah.
So this is your opportunity to have a say, but I won't goad people into saying things for a clickbait headline or what have you, because God knows I've never made any money doing this, and writing the books is my opportunity. This is just the platform I use to obtain the opportunity to write the books.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you shoot yourself in the foot pretty quickly if you don't respect the wishes, like to anyone with a regret of an interview and wants to have it squashed, then you're only yeah, you'd be quickly undoing yourself as a journalist if you started to just say, "Oh, stuff, yeah, I'm going to put it out."
I think it happens though, man. I
Oh,
think sometimes
it'd have to happen. Yeah.
I've had artists tell me that they've said we don't want this out there and it's sensitive, and it's even about people who might not be with us anymore, this sort of stuff. But people still print shit for the reason that you mentioned earlier, which is that it gets clickbaits, which therefore contributes to advertising dollars. But
Mm.
I hate using words like credibility and all of that sort of stuff, because I think they've been manipulated by used car salespeople and real estate agents. Passion and credibility and integrity, all these buzzwords. But I think you've got to carry yourself truly with honesty, is what I think it is, which means that if
I
you've said
agree.
that you would do something, do it.
Yep.
Okay, no
And if
matter
you
how
get asked a
difficult it is.
question, answer it honestly.
Yeah. How do you find the interviews? God, I've talked all about interviews, and I'm interviewing you here.
It's
I
fine.
know my style is generally about conversational, as you can tell. But when you're being interviewed, I assume through, because Miller's got he acts as a pretty solid gatekeeper, I imagine, in terms of the people he's sharing with you to have a chat to. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time it's we'd trust him in this instance. And I also, if I've got the chance, I've checked out your stuff as well. Like I had to listen to your interview with LG Petrov,
Oh yes.
which I understand was a lot like a bit of a throwback one that you'd put up after his passing. And so I guess most of the time we'll also take it on to check out who's interviewing us before we go ahead and say yes. And we're equally as probably our own gatekeepers in that respect. But Miller seems to know what's going on.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, there's him, and I think he does work with Dicey too, doesn't he, over there out west?
Yeah.
The Soundworks guy crew, they're fantastic. I've done quite a bit of work with those guys, just interviews, and did some crewing for Mayhem, which is a lot of fun. Bought their orange juice and salami.
Brutal.
For all of those people out there that think that they're hanging out in the back there smoking crack cocaine and banging chicks or what have you, mate, I can tell you it's a very tame affair at backstage at a Mayhem gig.
Peppermint tea and hummus.
Hummus definitely. I was pretty sure I might have bought some orange and apple and cinnamon. I think it might have been. I can't remember now. I'm just sort of making that bit up, but it was like that, and it was very very tame. And of course, then they go off there and scream blasphemies at the audience.
Yeah.
Very 2000 and I think it was 2017 or 18 that happened, man. But mate, I'll wrap things up because but before we do, please tell people listening where they can get in touch with your music and get in touch with you guys.
Good call. If you go to, probably the easiest is just through Facebook, Dr. Colossus the band, or even drcolossustheband.com. Any of those, if you look us up on Google, you'll find us. But if you head to the website, Dr. Colossus the band, Dr. Doctor, the tour dates for June are up there, and also the new album stuff. Info for the new album is on there too.
That was going to be my addendum question, that one there, because I did read the PR blurb and I wasn't sure whether an album was in the works or otherwise. So an album is definitely in the can. And
we've got a new album out the 26th of May called "I'm a Stupid Moron with an Ugly Face and a Big Butt, and my butt smells, and I like to kiss my own butt."
There you go. Yes.
So you can pre-order it, and that Pick a Bar is the first track off that album.
Yeah, I love the title, by the way. Now that you mentioned, of course, I read that you had a new album coming out. I don't know why I didn't bloody clue that was the case.
Your brain probably read that name and just blocked it.
I might have, yeah. I don't know. I think it was
Self-preservation.
I thought it might have been a slogan, actually, reading it back, now that I think back. But yeah, and I love the other thing. You had Jed T-shirts up there. Nobody talks about poor old Jed.
Yeah. Oh, Gil.
Gil. Yeah, poor old Gil, mate. I mean,
Yeah. No,
you know,
those are all that we've always favored those characters. The forgotten.
I love the T-shirt, man. I got to say, I love the fact that you've gone to that effort and you put that out there. So, again, for people listening, man, you should check out the merch game that Jono and the lads and Dr. Colossus have got, because it's quite something. It's up there with Macabre. You know the band Macabre?
Very much.
I had a chat to Lance, that he was a good bloke.
I was actually thinking about Macabre the other day because I was thinking about the art house. I don't know if you ever got to the art house in Melbourne.
No, I heard of it though. Yeah,
Just an absolute cracking little venue, and I was reminiscing with a friend, and I was like, I saw Macabre at the art house. I was like, wow, I cannot believe that.
I've missed them. I miss them. I went through a period where I tuned out of a lot of music, just was focusing on career pursuits and the like. And that was around about that 2008, I think the tour was. I might be wrong, or it might have been later.
Yeah, 2008 sounds pretty much right. Yeah.
Their new album is killer, man. If you haven't heard it yet,
sick. There's another one. I'll check that out. I'll add that to the list.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably, I got to say, man, I love the old shit, but that's probably their best album.
Cool. That's awesome.
It's like good enough for me to want to buy it on vinyl, which of course I found and did. So yeah, great band, cracking band, man. But man, thanks so much for the chat. Appreciate it. Great work too, by the way. You can tell I'm a fan. And look, I hope I can sort of see you guys. Are you playing in Goldie or Brisbane when you come up?
Yeah, we're playing Goldie on the Thursday, the 3rd of June at Moe's, and then Friday, 4th of June in Brizzy.
That's down in
Tav.
Mansfield Tav's closer to me. I'll definitely go to that one there. There's a few. Yep. Yeah, I know some of the guys that put on some of the other shows there. So it's a good place to play, actually, Mansfield. It's a good, solid suburban rock and roll, rock and metal venue. And Moe's is down in Burleigh, I think. Burleigh or Cooley, one of the two. Yeah.
Yeah, Burleigh.
Yeah, sweet. Well, mate, I'll if I bump into you in the crowd, let's have a beer if we can, or something like that. No doubt.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Everything. But,
good to meet you, man.
Likewise, brother. Thanks so much for the chat. It's awesome.
Likewise. Take care.
Okay, mate. Catch ya.
Yeah.
See ya. You have been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith. That interview subject was Jono Colliver from the Melbourne outfit Dr. Colossus. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening.